But not really a question I have, but it's what bothers me a lot is that after reparation, and I'm not saying reparation is not good, people must be, we as descendants of the African slavery, we must give a charge. But so much things that went wrong during slavery, reparation. And I agree with you, we don't want no money. Money is not all. Because when the Europeans came to have seek a new route, they came up with the idea looking for the 3 G's. The gold, and the glory. The gold, the resources of the territory wealth, and plunder. Their God, they give us Christianity, so-called what doesn't believe that we worship God. We must look at who was worshiping in the identity of Eurocentric philosophy. And their glory is what they can relax and enjoy after they have plundered, enslaved, and destroyed. A lot of us here, and I don't know about anybody else, I've searched myself, and I love being who I am made as a black African descendant. I'm not African with the C-A-N, but the K-A-N. And if you understand that terminology, because that C-A-N don't really represent us. The K-A-N with the cap, it's just terminology. But what I want to say, after reparation, what next? Because most of us here in the British society, and even in North America, and even in England, and even in China, and even in Japan, because yes, as Dr. Ivan Bansinger once said, they came before Columbus, black people was towing all again. Yeah, there were black people around, nothing what they call carrying our foolishness. These are Africans. But what about after reparation? Because we are so, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean government, they don't teach us anything in primary school, secondary. History is not taught. Our race is lost. We don't understand our history, we don't understand who we are. You get the 2,000 US or the 2 million US, but many of us are dying mentally, socially, physically. Many of us are suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome disorder. What happened after reparation? What the government of Trinidad and Tobago is doing, what the CARICOM government is doing, what we as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago or the African diaspora are doing, and the conversation is not carrying on when we go after reparation.
I thought I gave one point. I'm talking also about examples that we see first, that we have had so-called independence, and I will deal with that in the second paper, that there was no distribution of land to the African after slavery. Some Africans fled into the Lamartine Hills, others fled into different parts of the country. And we must remember, don't confuse the question about the Americans. They were the only examples of people ex-slaves who got land in Trinidad. The Americans came to Trinidad between 1815 and 1816, and they were given lands, aka the 6 companies. And it is shocking, we should remember that, because 1815, 1816, the British Act to emancipate Africans had not yet been passed. So what we had in the backup princes done were emancipated slaves, and you should know why. They were emancipated because they fought with the against the so-called national movement of the rest of the Americans. And they were brought here after the British were defeated and given lands. They were the only Africans who were given lands. After emancipation, we got no lands. And therefore, I am saying that was a major blunder. The continuation of the impoverishment of the African. He was set loose, virtually driven out, and he became a wage worker, and he had to work for not only 4 years, but a couple years after, working for nothing, or almost nothing. And it's when he did not choose to work for them, next to nothing, that we found the Portuguese, then the Chinese being brought in, and when they fell out of love with agriculture here, that is when the Indians came. So the Africans literally were thrown out of their estates and given the choice, you could work there for the next 4 years for nothing, or go. And that is an issue that was not dealt with during colonialism. And it was not dealt with in 1962 when we became independent. So we have a lot of young people looking like you and I, up in Promenade, climbing on top of each other, 5 shots on 400 square feet allowed, and they would not move, and nobody is telling them to move, that they should come out. We saw that the oil companies closed down. We see the last stage of it. And some of us are waiting to hear, when will there be a distribution of land? Not a sale of land, because those who don't have, how you say, who have more corn, feed more folk. And if you don't have no corn, you can't feed no folk. You don't have no money, you can't buy no land. You just could watch the land. So that's a distribution of land. Distribution of land is giving land to people as of their right. The descendants of the Africans have not yet been given land. And they will become emancipated by magic. They will always remain at the bottom of the ladder. And if you're putting an Eskimo in Trinidad, then the African will go a little lower down, and the Eskimo will be number 5. And so it goes, because it doesn't have either the money to buy land, or has it received land. So what your question raises, the question is, what after reparation? Is this time around, we are asking for not only national governments, but CARICOM to recognize that part of the emancipation equation should have been the distribution of land. Now you will see the trouble. You will see the Mugabe, what happened to Mugabe. And they will build no statue of Mugabe, but they will build for Nelson. And South Africa is just as bad as it was before. They have no distribution of land. So that's to answer your question. If we don't have distribution of land, then we could talk what reparation we want.
Ladies and gentlemen, before next speaker, I know this could be a very emotional time for most of us. So we just ask you to, keep your contribution as short as possible, otherwise we'll get you tomorrow. Thank you, Mr.
Good afternoon. My name is Winston Clark. To the learned professor, I heard you using the word we. We. And to whom does we belong?
Before you go on, let me answer the who. I thought I said, who was it? We are the descendants of the African slaves.
The question was in that context.
Hold on. The descendants, whether is in the Caribbean now, or some of them have migrated or self-exiled. Some people use the term, they self-exile. They go into exile even in metropoles. And they carry with them all the risk of these problems. That is what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
So that's it.
Okay. Now, CARICOM initiative in reparation had a proposal where one of the issues in reparation was debt, where the debt of each government in the Caribbean would have been forgiven. My understanding as a people, taken live was the massive landowner in Trinidad and Tobago. I saw a smile on your face. And I would like to ask you, is it that you are proposing that we form such a committee to take back to the CARICOM government, Trinidad and Tobago, that we have prepared ourselves and we are about ready to meet with our Caribbean brothers and sisters to further the discussion on reparation? Is there such a group that has been formed already, or is this where we are?
Yes. There was a committee set up. I do not know what has happened to them. All I know is that nothing is happening.
Okay. And that is where we allow government to handle the things that we as citizens. So I propose to you and to each one that is about to further of us that is about to further the debate or the conversation on reparation is that we the people and not we the government, we the people want to challenge taken life and the different insignias that have been operated throughout the world, continuing slavery, so that we meet within ourselves and get our stories together and not take the government of the Caribbean. If the government of the Caribbean were interested in reparation, they would have changed the school curriculum 1900.
Well, let me go. In a sense, what we are doing is recognizing what we the people need. We the people, in a modest start in South, are saying that we want reparation to become a number one issue. And you mentioned taken life. I'll go down the side and come up there. I mentioned the oil field because the oil industry was largely developed for more than 100, because we started producing oil by 1890s. We have been producing oil by the start of the Second World War, 1939. We were the largest oil refinery in the Commonwealth. We were producing oil for the British merchant ships and all their projects. That is why German U-boats reached quite down because that is the importance of Trinidad and oil industry. But what I don't want to go on too much, what I want to say is, I'm watching quietly because I hope they're not going to distribute, they're not going to sell the oil land, but distribute. I want to say this word, distribute to the sons and daughters who labor in your industry. Wow. One second, I mentioned Cater Line. Cater Line is part of the issue in my second paper because Cater Line came here. By the time Cater Line, before they bought up the Jamaican sugar cane, when they had acquired the land in Trinidad, Cater Line was the largest producer of sugar cane in the Commonwealth. This is before the bought sugar. That is very important. The lands in Trinidad go to the Empire of Cater Line. 2 years ago, or was this 3? I can't remember. And somebody took me to a museum in London. Cater Line has a museum in London. But Cater Line never built a museum in the Caribbean where they got all the wealth. And Cater Line is only one company that happened. What about the Scotland and the store? Or the chocolate? Or the Cadbury? You know Cadbury Brothers own an estate in the other range? Not a museum, not a park, not a ward, not a primary school, not anything. That is the second thing. Many of them left, dust behind, and they went to the vineyards. That is why I'm talking about reparation in phase 2. Because we have seen, take for instance, Texas. I used to work in Texas before 2005. Texaco was in Trinidad for 100 or something years, either as Texaco or over the subsidiaries. And when they left, it was surprised, and they left nothing.
But that is not all that Texaco did. Texaco diversified the land, all of the land in Trinidad and Tobago that occupied oil for drilling. Texaco have been moving. Remember, we had leaseholds, we had Shell.
But before you go on, Texaco, like Cater Line, have been putting money in American universities, financing professorships, chairs, buildings, and research.
Okay, so let me finish.
Nothing interesting.
Okay, let me finish by just saying to you that one of the things that I would wish come out of this discourse is that the organizers of this function here this afternoon get to the point where we are going to select leaders to go forward. And that is what Japan did to the United States in the 40s after World War II, when you had the Japanese encampment. Okay? The Japanese got together. Okay.
America paid the Japanese families $20,000 as reparation for internment camp. That's what they're talking about. Japanese families got $20,000 from each one of them. Reparation.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Again, I believe emotions are general high, but also gets the point. So as I say, we get much more. Thank you. Sorry, no part of you was short.
I'm really proud of these kinds of things. I appreciate you guys oppressors of the government said no. And try to move. Most of you may not recognize that this gentleman is an engineer training. And it tells you the kind of broad-based education system we have that could have Professor Sweet speak with the authority that he did on reparations and also give us good background history. Now, what I have to say is a comment, but it's not for most of you gray-haired people here. There's some young people here. All the young people, sorry, they're there. You have questions in Brooklyn? Don't go there. If you want to go on a visit, go to Ghana. Go to Nigeria. But those of you who live in Trinidad, slavery is an academic thing. I have visited both of the slave castles, Elmina in Ghana and Goree Island in Senegal. That's an experience. You go there and you actually feel the spirits. You feel them going past. So I think that in order to advance this debate, we need to let young people know that there's a world beyond what they're living. Go on to BBC now. BBC has a nice programming on Africa. Go to Al Jazeera. There's a whole bunch of information. Because the slavery debate is very complicated. And there was a nice one last week on Zanzibar, which is part of Tanzania. Okay? Tanganyika and Zanzibar. So please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Clive Sona. I am a retiree. I'm also the descendant of a oil field worker who slaved in the oil field. To answer the question about whether there is a reparation committee, there is a reparation committee that was formed by the government in 2014. And with the advent of the change of government, that committee received no financing from the present government. However, they do meet probably once a month or once every 2 months at the 12th Tribe of Israel place in Digomati. The chairman of that committee is Ayagoro Omi. And he does also some articles in the Guardian on reparations and other topics of interest. I had a brief run-in with the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, President, who, you know, the party boasts of being one of mainly African. And this was at the Emancipation celebration. So I asked him, well, why is it the government is not supporting the present Emancipation Committee? Because they have no funding. And his reply to me was, why did you allow the UNC to steal so much money from the treasury? He asked me that because at the time I was the General Secretary of the National Joint Action Fund. So, but in going forward, we must not only move alone, but seek to have young people involved, because us gray-haired people, can't do much again. So, once again, honor me here. But the time has come for us not to work in isolated pockets, but to get together with other organizations who are doing the same. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to foundation to what I think is a very, very provocative presentation, and say how much I'm looking forward to the production, the writing, when it does appear. In the context of the provocation of the thought, I wanted to ask not for you to respond necessarily tonight, but perhaps in the writing, and not necessarily to disclose anything which is coming about your proposal to address the issue of blooming and that agreement between the ACP and the European countries, when there was an attempt to set up some kind of agreements and supportive arrangements, economic, etc. I think that there is a lot in that which supports your argument, because when those of us who have worked in that area look at that and you see what transfers will, to the extent that the ideals were not met, they perhaps dealt with the lack of infrastructure in the recipient countries, and that is a function of what you talked about tonight. So I'm looking forward to that aspect of your book, if you plan to tackle it at all. The other area had to do, again, you talked a little bit about what is happening. As I said, it provoked idea. To my mind, one of the outcomes or the impacts of this whole trade and or the attendant issues has to do with the cultural devastation. And I think that is as much part of the whole, situation. Yes, the whole package. So
I mentioned in the paper.
Yes, I did. So
the African man was taken from his million. Not Sinti. I had a little short paper in it where I talked about what was unique about African slavery. In that not only the African was moved, there was slavery from other places. Across the Atlantic. He couldn't go back when he wanted holidays like Jet Rex. Couldn't go back.
yeah.
So that movement was permanent.
Right.
There was a rupture, language, culture, religion, family, clan, all of that was robbed.
Yes.
And the end point is that something arrested since 1970 for their 50 years, trying to find this back, to rediscover,
Yes.
to re-establish a link with Africa.
And
So that I agree with you.
yeah, my third point really builds on what you just said, because I think that another one of the consequences has to do with, well, at least in my view, the brokenness which we experience and which is rife in many of the societies and countries that we have to be, in which you have populations, large or small,
One
of
second,
African descendants.
the point the gentleman made there about working with each other, I make mention of the paper.
Yes.
And this is why I'm saying the time now is to look for the past. Don't spend too much time worrying that this one is doing that. You cannot do what you think is done.
Yeah.
And I believe that that is what we intended. If other people sit down, they sit down. What we are trying to do, we advertise it to NJAC and I will they know fully well about it. And our point is that we intend to go forward. And we intend to work with anybody. That's our position. Somebody, I think you may not mention about the infrastructure.
Yes.
I am a civil engineer.
Yes.
Not by chance, not by accident. I went to university not by accident. Second time. And I took up civil engineering not by accident. I was caught up with the extension of 70. What is the best thing to do with my time and my skill? I felt that development was at the core of our experience. An essential issue was the transformation of the physical environment. So I stayed in civil engineering for the past, that was from 83 So I see the importance. In fact, now that there's talk about the Silk Road, after some time, so that's like somebody to know, the importance of infrastructure. I remember going to France to deliver a paper on the importance. I didn't even know French, because I didn't know French in school and Spanish. Who developed I had to translate for me. In other words, this was a conference that was dealing with the importance of infrastructure and development. Another conference, I tell you, in France. Only black people from Africa came up and speak to countries. I was about to tell you who was in that conference.
No, just the last point I wanted to make is in the context of the development of the people, because I think it has far-reaching consequences, the ripple effect, and I think that we are seeing some of that in youth culture, the way it is played out, and some of the brokenness we have in many of our countries. You mentioned some of them, Brazil, etc.
What was it?
Bali.
Huh?
Bali. Bali.
You organize a meeting?
Yes.
How soon?
Yes. Well, I don't know.
How soon?
Let me get back to you let me get back to you.
That's what I believe at the time, as some people say, the stars are aligned. It's not obvious, it's just, there's something in the atmosphere that I believe that one is get up.
No, I just wanted to make the point that I think that what you're talking about, implications that the ripples are attendant on us right now, and it is manifested in some of the young people, their behaviors, their choices, etc. And if that brokenness, the healing, is not addressed, then it has the potential to continue. One of the things you said is theological, really, because you talk about forgiveness. But forgiveness and reconciliation, or the way we would use a restoration, that's the next step. So we can forgive, but if the restoration doesn't take place, then we will remain brokenness remains.
Like South Africa.
Yes.
To do presentation.
What's up?
Would you like to be at the University of the Caribbean to do presentation? I can get you in contact with Dr. Jacob, so she could
Yes.
Well, tomorrow I've seen my professor. I will talk to Dr. Jacob. I'll take your contact.
When you finish, I'll give my cell phone number.
Yeah.
And you can contact me. Yes. Yes, we believe that now is the time. Now is the time. We have to go forward. And hope that everybody is better. But in the meantime, do what you do. I am glad, I mean, I am feeling good. I didn't drink anything about it. But I'm already feeling it. My feeling is good. I am glad I came. And I could just see the ball rolling. We have plenty more of this thing.
Dr. Sweet, excellent presentation. I just wanted to ask, Joel, I was invited, by the way. I just wanted to ask, how is the work that you are doing, the case that you are building, related to the work that the Hillary Beckles team is doing or has been doing?
Hillary Beckles is the used to be principal of our investment equipment all there. If you want to put it this way, we are all laboring in the same way. I'm not putting it on. You don't learn. This is so, I didn't come by straight. I came through a fortress route. And one of the things we right now, I just finished another paper, it was in history, and the first phase of our organization will be and the different routes that converge and cause the consciousness of some of the people who are in this gathering, who are not old and great. But in 1969, we were not old and great. We were young. We were influenced by different things. long before the turbulence in Sir George Williams or any of those things. We believe that the resistance has been going on. And we have linked to it. Some of us, I grew up in Princeton, Django and Baptist. Descendants of the state have not always made up quietly. Sometimes things don't too good for them. But when the iron is up, we have to be. And I believe this is a good start. I feel good.
Okay, I think we now do the last question. And the reason why I leave this for last is because the name of this gentleman, by his name alone, name of this gentleman, you will introduce his name. Thank you.
Good evening, Professor Sweet, to the audience. My name is Musa Mugabe. Not Musa Mugabe, right? Not the Mugabe that the world hated, right? My name, I assume that name somewhere in the middle of the 70s, 1976, somewhere around there. And it means athlete. So I used to be involved in track and field. I came from a sporting background, sporting family. Okay? But I, like Father Moon, would look forward to the final papers, right, when it's published. Right? I am a child of the 70s, a student of the 70s, and you will know what that means. Right? I compliment the fact that reparations should be shared among institutions of our various countries throughout the Caribbean, right? Be it universities, the schools, the primary schools, the hospitals, the mental hospitals, right? Because the damage that was done to African people throughout that 500 years, it goes very deep. And in some cases, even very psychic. If you read, most of us here might have heard of Franz Fanon. If you read any of his books, Franz Fanon looked at the psychological dehumanization of the African, right? And you could research Franz Fanon and get some of his books. The fact is, we have a lot of things that are happening today that we can't seem to understand. A lot of incidents that take place. Right? And it could be a direct result of slavery and the effects of slavery on the human mind that has perpetuated through the centuries. Gender-based violence, for one, could be a result of slavery. When for 500 years you are breaking up our families, you're taking the man away, you raping the woman in front of the man, right? And that used to go on like almost every day, right? These things remain in the psyche of our people. So when we say reparations to institutions, right? That compensation, I would call it, should flow down to our institutions. And as I say, our hospitals, our mental hospitals, our psychiatric institutions, right? Our schools, and start from right? To the Montessori kindergarten schools, because we have to start something. So I don't know if you want to respond, it wasn't a question as such. I just have to compliment the group, compliment the people, compliment all those who helped to put together this forum here tonight, and we look forward to others.
Well, what I would say is that would appeal to the audience. Put this writing, my friend, Paul made a statement about how many you are really. We have made that. This is to tell us how much work we still have to do with what we call the lost two generations. Because go back from 1970, when we were young, right? What we have and what we are reading in the papers every day is virtually 2 generations of self-hate. Every day we see killing. The African killing the African. Every day. I went to a period where I decided I'm going to read papers again. Too painful. And in a sense, one of the things that made me come out of this hard being inflicted by watching TV and papers of black people killing black people. A black generation of young people coming up who are not reaching 25. Self-hate. At least they have no interest in it. This country is not there, they don't feel it. But it's easy to blame them. But we fell short. Let me just say so, let me confess. We made mistakes. And I am frightened that we keep making our mistakes again. I'm not interested in who do and who is. I don't really consume it now. We spend a lot of time after 1970 consuming that and then marching forward and marching backwards. And I'm saying, see this is your operation. Let it be one issue on an agenda. It is rediscovery of self and reconstruction of African intelligence in this system. I am.
This presentation is actually being streamed, and there are people all over the world actually
This is one of my schoolmates on presentation. He asked me to do them.
South Africa, the States, and all of that. Before we go to the letter, invite someone to the podium. Someone who has a pleasure of working with. I didn't actually play with it, but if I could have played with it, I would like to invite Mr. A. Roddy, former national player, former principal, to play with the class.
AKA Palmer.
Sorry, AKA Palmer.
Good evening. As I move the vote of thanks, I would like to praise my delivery. First, I must thank the Reverend Archdeacon Thomas for being so kind as to give us this forum for these deliberations. Thank you because this gesture is like falling in line with what has been known by this particular church, having had 2 canons, 2 patrons, who would have supported exactly this type of venture. The 2 I referred to, Canon Norrie Clark and Canon Max Farquhar. Many thanks for your gesture. Secondly, I would like to thank our feature speaker, because he expected much and he provided much. Thank also our chairman for guiding us through the entire session with poise, with humor, and with class. We must also give special thanks to Mr. Hollis Clifton because he has been doing recording for posterity, which is important. I must thank Mr. Lee Charles, former ambassador and activist in his own way. And finally, keeping it short, I must thank you, the audience, for tuning out, for supporting with your questions and your presence. And I thank you in advance for the advertisement for this course that I expect you to go through it after tonight. To all, many, many thanks. And I wish you safely to your respective homes, with pleasant dreams, and renewed vigor to face the morrow and all that it comes after the morrow. Thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you, Roland. We have some very tiny questions with some bottles of water to the back. So, if you want tea, well, yes, you can also get tea. So again, it was a great evening. Let's sit with you. Thank you.